Good morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and here is your latest forecast update for the 15th of March 2025. A lot to get through today, including heavy rainfall and storms up in far North Queensland, delivering some healthy rainfall accumulations up there, tropical low and tropical cyclone activity galore across the Northern Territory and parts of Western Australia, and rumbles of a Coral Sea tropical low as well. All of that plus more coming up in today's with the forecast. If you are brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing, but let's get stuck straight into things this morning up in far North Queensland, where we do have that southeasterly flow bringing in plenty of showers and storms up into the far north of the state, and you can see significant rainfall accumulations as a result have been reported overnight. Falls up to 230 millimetres have been reported north of Innisfail, and widespread accumulations between 100 down to about 150 millimetres have been reported between Cairns as far south as Cardwell. The rainfall around the Ingham and the Cardwell area was actually a bit lighter than expected, but everywhere else it's been a lot heavier than what we have expected as well, and the accumulations we were predicting yesterday, last night, of up to about 300 millimetres throughout tonight and into early tomorrow morning, they're really looking like they're coming into fruition right now. Now, it's this monsoon trough that's driving it, and you can see plenty of rainfall and thunderstorms now really beginning to develop here over Willis Island sort of area. They've picked up some very healthy rainfall accumulations as well overnight. You can see Willis Island, the observation centre right here. I'm not sure if you can make it out on the map, but it has been sitting under a line of some pretty heavy shower bands over the last couple of hours. All of this rainfall here slowly developing and slowly heading towards the west as well, and that's going to get itself collided up with the Daintree rainforest coastline pretty soon as well, later on this afternoon and into this evening. And you can see that on the convective forecast models, plenty of shower and storm activity expected to continue throughout tonight. In fact, it is going to get much heavier as we head later on into today. You can see underestimating the rainfall a little bit, but still heavy showers expected here and there throughout the remainder of this morning. There will be a bit of a lull later on this afternoon, but then it'll pick up again dramatically this evening for the Cassowary Coast, and then really picking up for areas between Cooktown down to Cairns, especially around the Daintree rainforest, with some very heavy falls expected tonight and into early tomorrow morning. You can see the rainfall there relentless into early tomorrow morning. In fact, relentless into early tomorrow afternoon. Plenty of showers and thunderstorms around the Daintree rainforest expected, and some heavy showers as well expected into the Cassowary Coast as well. This is going to lead to some pretty significant rainfall accumulations, and whilst, yes, we are looking at the convective forecast models right now, so we normally take these rainfall accumulations with a very heavy pinch of salt, considering the fact that the rainfall that we're seeing developing offshore right now and what the convective models have been saying over the last couple of days. I mean, if we take a look at this, cross-referencing the rainfall data at the peak of the rainfall event tonight, when the rain is meant to be at its heaviest, you can see 3-hourly accumulations up to that 100 millimetre mark there, which would be about 30 to 35 millimetres an hour, and then a lot of these rain swathes through here with accumulations up around that 30 to 40 millimetre mark over an hour-long period. In fact, there are a little bit heavier showers embedded in this. So the convective forecast models, what I'm trying to illustrate with that point is that they're doing a very good job highlighting how much rainfall is expected here, and as such, rainfall accumulations numbers here are very, very accurately illustrated with the convective forecast models, and we are expecting some big-time falls tonight into the Daintree rainforest. So let's take a look at some of those numbers right now, and yes, I do actually believe pretty much every number that the Access Convective has spat out here. You can see Cooktown expecting about 100 millimetres of rainfall, down around the Woodgill and Cape Tribulation area, anywhere between 150 out to about 350 millimetres can be expected, with the heaviest accumulations into the Daintree rainforest up to 500 millimetres possible tonight. And again, this is not impossible for far North Queensland. Some monster accumulations can happen in 12-hour periods here, and 500 millimetres, that's no stranger to far North Queensland. Rainfall accumulations around Port Douglas up around that 300 millimetre mark, heading south around the Cairns area around that 100 millimetre mark. Some significant falls expected around Cairns tonight as well. Even inland to the Atherton Tablelands, Mareeba, Atherton and Ravenshoe, falls up around that 100 200 millimetre mark are also possible. So again, we can't be writing out big time falls there. And into the northern side of the Cassowary Coast, up between Innisfail through to the Yarrabah Peninsula, falls between 100 out to about 250 millimetres are possible, on top of the 250 millimetres that some of these locations have already picked up. Rainfall will be lighter down south of Innisfail. You can see falls anywhere between that sort of 20 to 120 millimetre mark through Innisfail and Tully, and then falls getting light down towards the Cardwell and the Ingham area, and no concern there. Now, the rainfall is certainly worth a lot of airtime, that's for sure, and this will cause some significant flooding up here if we see 500 millimetres falling tonight. So if you live in a flood-prone area along the Daintree River, use today to prepare your home adequately for some really significant rainfall. If you live in a really flood-prone area and major flooding can cause concerns for your property, then I'd actually recommend getting some sandbags out just to be on the safer side of this weather event. This is some really significant rainfall coming through, and there hasn't been much warning on this. And again, if we do see a couple of hours of 50 millimetres an hour up there, which is completely plausible, and on top of the rainfall that's going to fall throughout the remainder of today and into tomorrow morning as well, we could be seeing 24-hourly accumulations starting now up around that 400 to 500 millimetre mark. It's not unheard of for far North Queensland, and it's not something that we don't see very often up there, but it will still cause some significant rainfall as a ramification, some significant flooding up there is what I meant to say. So as such, if you live in a really flood-prone area, make sure you've got your flood plan in place now and beginning to prepare your property. I know it's very much last minute stuff here, but we have been talking about this stuff for a couple of days, and we didn't expect it to get this heavy though. And like I said, the convective forecast models are a saving grace. It's a shame that they don't go out any further than their forecast period. But yeah, plenty of rainfall now beginning to build offshore, and it's going to take a couple of hours. This is very slow moving stuff and very heavy stuff to get itself jammed up against the North Queensland coastline, and when it does, it is going to release, and lots of rainfall can be expected. This is a really active burst in the monsoon over here. Now, pushing the forecast forward, there's plenty more rainfall to talk about as well across far North Queensland. That's going to come in into the early parts of next week as well. We're expecting a weak tropical low to begin development off in the Gulf of Carpentaria, extended to the monsoon trough, so it's either going to be a very broad monsoonal low, which could contract into a very weak tropical low on the eastern and the western ends, and those systems could split off, which is actually what the forecast models have been suggesting. But for all intents and purposes, expecting a low pressure system to begin development sometime on Monday in the Gulf of Carpentaria, and that's going to continue those showers through Sunday and in towards Monday morning across far North Queensland, extending down in towards south into North Queensland around Townsville and as far south as the Whitsundays, and then we're expecting this rainfall to continue and really pick up through Monday night into early Tuesday morning as this low pressure system begins to develop and tighten up quite nicely. And this is where the heaviest falls are expected on the Queensland side of things, of course, in the immediate northwestern corner of the state around Corumba and Mornington Island, Burketown and Croydon. Some significant falls possible around those areas there, north of Mount Isa, like I said, into the northwest of the state. But we're also expecting some very significant falls from an inflow feature that's going to set itself up somewhere between Cooktown down towards Mackay, with the heaviest falls being concentrated south of the Yarrabah Peninsula and Cairns, through Townsville, and then down to about the Whitsundays, Proserpine and Bowen, that sort of area. Heavy falls expected through Tuesday morning and into Wednesday morning as well, and then very heavy rainfall continuing through Wednesday and in towards Thursday for this part of Queensland. There's still a little bit of discrepancy between the forecast models, especially with the axis, which is still calling for this to develop into what will become pretty close to a full-blown tropical cyclone. But one thing's for sure, and what's very important to note right now, is for areas between Cairns down towards Bowen, some very heavy falls are expected to pipe up from Monday night. They'll be very heavy through Tuesday afternoon and into Tuesday evening, and then right through Wednesday and in towards early Thursday morning. Some very heavy falls can be expected, especially for locations between Cardwell down to Townsville, and then heavy falls possible between Cairns right down to Bowen. The heaviest falls will be around the Ingham area, and this has been on the forecast for the last couple of days as well, so I've got a high degree of confidence in saying that we are expecting some very heavy rainfall in this part of Queensland. So it is definitely time now to start putting your flood preparation plan into action. If you live in an area that's very likely to be cut off, especially considering that we've had some significant rainfall here in the past couple of months, we just came out of the worst floods on record, or one of the worst flooding events on record for this part of Queensland about a month ago. So if you do live in a very flood prone area and you do expect to be cut off when you see rainfall accumulations approaching 400 or 500 millimeters, I'd actually start preparing and maybe even stockpiling a few supplies at this point, getting yourself ready to be cut off for a couple of days up to a week, especially considering if we do see river levels rise very rapidly, which is possible considering we're expecting more rainfall to come through on top of the stuff that's already occurred over the last couple of days. But then some very heavy falls piping up on Monday, and the heavy rainfall continuing on and off through Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, and multiple days of heavy rainfall, as you can see on these rainfall accumulations maps see here, will lead to some very significant accumulations. I mean, this is just 4-day rainfall here on the Axis forecast model, which is probably underdoing it up to about 400, even up towards 500 millimeters of stuff. We'll be definitely talking about a bit of a flooding event up here. So again, if you live in a flood prone area, it's time to start preparations now, considering the fact that we are looking at a heavy amount of rainfall. And I imagine people, especially after the flooding event that's just gone, they want to err on the side of caution and be more prepared for something as opposed to less prepared. So again, if you live in this part of Queensland, especially around the Ingham, the Halifax, the Lucinda area, I mean, Lucinda is pretty light on the flooding side of things, but around the Ingham area, especially if you live close to the, I believe it's the Cardwell River. I'm really lost with some of the geography. I've completely forgotten it. The Herbert River, rather, major river system. I can't believe I forgot that. But yeah, if you live in a flood-prone area along the Herbert River especially, I've got some pretty significant concerns for that. And some of the rivers that flow through Rollingstone and Bambaroo as well down towards Townsville. And even the Ross River, if you live in a very flood-prone area on the Ross River, especially further upstream into the Lake Ross area, then I'd definitely start thinking that there is some significant water on the way. I think preparations around the Townsville area are a little bit unnecessary, and certainly on the overkill side, especially through today and into tomorrow. And whilst rainfall will be heavy around Townsville, it's not going to be 1,000 millimeters in a couple of days like we saw last time. So the flooding event is not going to repeat itself. But if you do live in a very flood-prone area, like I'm talking very flood-prone, you flood on thunderstorms and showers and that sort of stuff, which accounts for a very small fraction of the population up here. But still, if you live in a very flood-prone area, I'd certainly start thinking about preparations. And even if you flood on major flooding, I'd probably start making some minor preparations as well, especially around the Herbert River. Like I said, plenty of rainfall coming through in this forecast period here, especially as we push the forecast forward through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. Some very heavy falls can be expected, and then by the looks of things, that rainfall will die off through Thursday and towards Friday as well. Still some heavy falls expected here and there and towards Thursday night and towards Friday morning, but the rainfall then beginning to ease off as we get out towards the 21st to the 22nd of March. So yeah, plenty of rainfall expected around the far north of Queensland as well. I mean, we've got those two rainfall events, the two distinct rainfall events coming through, with the rainfall coming through tonight and then about 24 hours of a lull period, and then through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, and even in towards Friday morning as well. Some very heavy falls expected between Cardwell down to Townsville. Accumulations in this area, Cardwell expecting about 400 millimetres or so, Ingham probably up to about that 500 millimetre mark, Lucinda and Halifax as well pushing 550 millimetres in those area, and peak falls around the Herbert River catchment could be as high as 750 millimetres. Rollingston can expect up to about 500 millimetres, the Paloma Dam could see up to about 500 millimetres as well, and then down to Townsville probably about 200 millimetres of not really much needed rainfall for there, but again 200 millimetres spread over a couple of days won't be problematic for the Townsville area. Significant falls also expected south to Ayr, with falls up to about 150 millimetres between Ayr and Bowen, and falls up to about 100 millimetres expected from residual southeasterly showers coming in from the southeast into the Mackay area and through the mountains adjacent to Mackay and into the Whitsundays. All around it, some pretty significant rainfall. And just before I round this video out, you can see there might be a bit of a tropical development somewhere in the Coral Sea as we get into the last week of March. You can see how the forecast models have been supporting this over the last couple of days. The Eastern Blue Wave, not so much. The Eastern Blue Wave has never been a fan of this tropical development, apart from stuff in the Gulf of Carpentaria. But if we take a look at the GFS forecast model, you can see pushing the forecast forward into the really long range, there are rumbles of activity between the 25th out to about the 30th of March into the long range GFS forecast. And I don't want anybody to be making conclusions from this and saying that Coral Sea tropical low cyclone is on the cards at this point, but I just thought I'd throw it in there to kind of quash all of the concerns. There's a lot of talk right now on Facebook, especially about tropical low activity in the Gulf of not in the Gulf of Carpentaria, into the Coral Sea in general. That's going to go to Queensland as a powerful cyclone. Not going to happen at this stage, and I want to put everybody's worries about that to rest. We will know for sure what activity we're expecting, if any, by around the 21st or the 22nd of March, so next weekend. So stick around for that. But at this point, it's still far too early to tell, and major discrepancies between the forecast models are making the forecast very difficult indeed. I don't think we need to go over the Gulf of Carpentaria tropical low in great detail, considering we already have, and it's not also going to be impacting too many people, but we are expecting some significant rainfall to occur across the northern parts of the Northern Territory, and you can see not so much starting throughout the next couple of days. There will be a few showers and thunderstorms here and there, especially into the northeastern parts of the Northern Territory around Nullarbor and Groote Island, but then significant rainfall begins to pipe up as this low pressure system begins development through Wednesday and Thursday, and you can see a bit of a rainfall event extending into the Northern Territory and down in towards South Australia as well, and some heavy falls can be expected into the desert areas there. And you can see 10-day rainfall accumulations looking pretty healthy across the northern tip of the Northern Territory, and then down along the Queensland Northern Territory border as well. Even Mount Isa could be seeing accumulations up to about 150 millimetres, and then falls between 50 and 100 millimetres also possible into the northwest and northeastern corner of South Australia as well. So some healthy falls all around expected, and depending on how this tropical low develops in the Gulf of Carpentaria, we could be seeing some significant rainfall into the northeastern side of the Northern Territory and the northwestern side of Queensland as well. All round looking like a pretty healthy weather forecast, especially in terms of this much needed rainfall for the Northern Territory. They do desperately need stuff like this, so certainly something that's a bit more of a good news on the forecast as opposed to a bad news, because a lot of this rainfall won't cause devastating flooding. It's just going to be that nice pleasant stuff that a lot of these communities really need to see, because it has been record dry across the Northern Territory this wet season, in stark contrast to Queensland and Western Australia, which are significantly above average across a lot of locations in their rainfall numbers. The Northern Territory is just crashing. In fact, some locations have only received 10% of their average wet season deluge. A lot of locations are looking a little bit better off than that, but it just goes to show how dry parts of the Northern Territory have been through this northern rainfall onset period. Anyways, moving things over towards Western Australia, there is an area that I want to watch, at least in the initial short term, and I'm showing you right now. No other forecast model is really suggesting this, apart from the Axis, which is generally a red flag in terms of tropical cyclone forecasting especially, but I just want to show you this because it actually does have a little bit of merit to it. I'm not sure if the satellite imagery is willing to load at this point in time, but you can see see plenty of cloud activity now developing around the Indonesia area, and this has been going for the last couple of days as well. We've seen plenty of consistent cloud and thunderstorm activity that's rotating around a common low pressure center, a very broad low pressure center through here. You can see some strong winds now developing north of the Kimberley region, and then some stronger winds also beginning to develop around a tighter low pressure system here. So again, this is certainly one to be watching, and in the immediate forecast period, it's still very unlikely, but we might see a very small tropical cyclone spin itself out. And if it does get itself going as a very small tropical cyclone, you can see the axis taken up to a respectable intensity pretty quickly here, and then heading for the West Australian coastline. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this is just as kind of a told you so in the forecast type thing. I am expecting something to develop out of this, whether it's just messy convection or a broad tropical low, but it could still spin itself up into a tropical cyclone, and I just want to put all worries about this at bay. I don't think it's going to swing into the West Australian coastline, especially with the current steering flow. I think if something does form, it's just going to race out to sea, and also considering no other forecast model is talking about it right now, it's also highly unlikely, but I just thought that I might throw it in there just as something to be keeping in the back of your head, because the chances are actually there. They're not actually zero for a tropical cyclone to form in this part of Western Australia over the next week. They are actually there. The GFS actually is calling for development at around that same time period, but it's from a completely different low pressure system, and then calling for it to develop quite quickly and in a very small fashion, this tropical cyclone, so it will be able to rapidly intensify very impressively as it races off towards the southwest as we get later on into the forecast period. But yeah, certainly that one could be a strong low pressure system, that's for sure, turning into a strong tropical cyclone, and certainly one worth watching. But again, the threat for the West Australia coastline right now is looking very minimal. You can see the Eastern Wave also calling for tropical cyclone, or tropical low development rather. I mean, the Eastern Wave has completely killed off that system that it was talking about yesterday. The system, or the forecast actually for the northwest coast of Western Australia is very uncertain over the next couple of weeks, especially as we get later on into the forecast period. One thing's for sure is around sort of Wednesday out to about Saturday the 19th to the 22nd, I'm expecting a tropical low to develop south of Indonesia and then swing itself either towards Western Australia or down towards the southwest. The chances right now for a West Australia cyclone impact in the next 10 days is looking exceedingly unlikely. I mean, below 1% at this point. That can change, and again, West Australia does need to be on notice for tropical cyclone impacts at all times of the northern rainfall season as well into the monsoon between November and April. You've got to be on your guard at all times up here at this time of the year, but again, the chances of a tropical cyclone impact looking exceedingly unlikely right now. Conditions very favourable offshore from Western Australia, though. I mean, just take a look at the sea temperatures right now, 31 pushing 32 degrees as you get yourself closer to the coastline. In fact, it could be in pockets pushing closer to about 33 degrees Celsius, especially up around the Kimberley region. The sea temperatures are very warm indeed, and there's not too much current flow down there either, which means that those sea temperatures, those water levels are very stagnant and they go very deep. There's plenty of energy content for these tropical cyclones. If they do decide to form and head for the West Australian coastline, we could be seeing some pretty problematic stuff. But again, I just want to say this very loudly and very clearly: for the West Australian coastline, the tropical northwest and West Australian coastline, the risk of a tropical cyclone impact in the next 10 days is exceedingly unlikely. Whilst it has been on the forecast for the last couple of days, it's not worth time of day at this point, and I just showed you, as a matter of fact, way of saying that this is what's on the forecast and this is what we can expect, because the chances for this aren't actually zero. It is a a forecast that has merit from the Axis forecast model, which is that's a very rare thing to say when we're talking about tropical cyclone stuff. The Axis is one of the forecast models with the least amount of merit when we're talking about tropical cyclone stuff. But again, for the West Australian coastline, I illustrate that point quite clearly, that you need to remain ready, and the chances of a tropical cyclone impact in the next 2 weeks, they're not zero, but again, looking very unlikely at this point. So any questions or comments, feel free to hit me up on Messenger as well, or leave a comment in the comment section down below. There's no real concern for major population centres either, so again, do not panic. The significant weather is right now over in the east, as it has been for the last couple of weeks, with the significant weather remaining over in the east and the West Australian waters remaining very, very quiet for another very big tropical cyclone that has been shown on the forecast models for the last couple of runs. Anyways, that basically does it for tropical stuff. In terms of winter weather, it is actually starting to get a little bit cooler as we head down into the south of the nation, especially around Tasmania and Victoria. We're starting to see a few more winter fronts start to clear in those areas at this point. We've actually got a pretty significant one coming through in the next couple of days. You can actually see that rainfall now beginning to build through here, and a cold front now really beginning to build in the southwest, or the southeast rather, of the Great Australian Bight. And we are expecting a pretty significant impact here, with this cold front really beginning to build throughout the remainder of today, and we're expecting a strong impact for Tasmania, or a comparatively strong impact, with plenty of rainfall and storms much later on tonight and into early tomorrow morning, and then a very cool blast from the south west, with some showers also expected into the west coast of Tasmania. Some significant rainfall also possible there, and we could also be seeing the first dustings of snow for the winter season up into the highlands of Tasmania as well. It is normally about this time of the year where we start to see a little bit of snow developing around Tasmania. Those temperatures really cold, or starting to get really cold there around mid-March and towards late March, and that's exactly where we are right now. And this cold front looks like it's going to be strong enough to drag up some significant or a very significant cold pull from the south, and as such provide a little bit of snow, a bit of a dusting of snow to the highland regions of Tasmania. Some rainfall is definitely possible, that's for sure, and you can see rainfall accumulations throughout the remainder of today if the forecast models are willing to load in. Rainfall accumulations throughout the remainder of this weather event here, so throughout the remainder of this weekend, will actually be quite healthy across the west coast of Tasmania, with falls as high as 60 to 70 millimetres expected in these areas. And also, like I said, some snow can also be expected as well. In terms of snow accumulations, it's only going to be a dusting. We might get a centimetre of settling snow for elevations above 1,200 metres, and snow is possible for elevations above about 800 or 900 metres in towards early tomorrow morning, which will then increase to about 1,000 metres as we get around into the later hours of the morning and then into the end of the day. Snow will be pretty much completely cleared out of the southwest of Tasmania, but again, it certainly does look like a pretty strong front. It's certainly going to impact Tasmania quite significantly, and you can see those wind gusts are also going to be quite strong as this cold front sweeps through, with peak wind gusts expected up around that 70 to 80 kilometre an hour mark, with the strongest wind gusts expected down around the Mount Cyclone Island area up to about 120 kilometres an hour, which is stock standard stuff for Mount Cyclone Island, one of the windiest places in the world, certainly one of the windiest places in Australia as well, and the wind observations there often trump what we can see in tropical cyclones across in the northern parts of Australia. But on that note, that is enough weather talk for today. I do hope that it has been a comprehensive weather forecast for everybody around Australia. I hope that everybody is feeling included. It's the first time that we've talked about winter weather in quite a while. So again, thank you so much for all of the support lately as well as we head into the winter season. The support has been much appreciated. Subscribe if you haven't already, and of course a special shout out to the channel sponsors. Their names are on screen right now. But that is all from me today, and I'll catch you on the next storm. Goodbye.